Today's workshop is sponsored by PHX Ventures. My name is Chumley. I'm an operating partner with PHX Ventures. We're a seed stage venture capital firm, so we invest in B2B SaaS companies. Not that there's anything wrong with building a consumer business, but we're B2B guys. And so this is the team, if you see some of us around. PHX Forward is a nonprofit that we started to build community here in the Phoenix Metro around software. All right, so today we're gonna Nate and I will get to our intros here in a second, but today's topic is on product prioritization. So we do these workshops a couple times a month usually on different areas of company building. And so we wanted to do something around product, and that's a really big topic. I think we could have scheduled a week together to talk about product in general. There's a lot to talk about, but so we tried to focus in today on a very narrow slice of it. All right, so I already did my brief intro that I'm with PHX Ventures, but prior to PHX Ventures, I spent 15 years building software products and startups. And I'll talk a little bit more about that experience, but Nate's the head of product at Nectar. And I do not know what is going on here. Hang on. It is not. Should we hook up a Mac to it? Yeah, you want to do it on your Mac?
I'm just doing it.
Here we go. We're going to start already. There we go. But so most recently, before coming here to PHX Ventures, I was the head of product at a company called Campus Logic. We were a B2B SaaS company. We started in 2013. Our first product went to market in 2014. We sold to colleges and universities. All of our solutions helped enable some aspect of the funding journey for students, which allowed schools to drive enrollment and retain their students. So when I came down here, Greg Scoresby, who's the founder of PHX Ventures, was the founder of Campus Logic. He recruited me to come down to run product engineering and customer success. In 2014, I was telling somebody we had one product, we had 2 customers. We finished that year with a 3rd customer, maybe a 4th customer now I think about it. I think we signed that customer, 3 live, 4 contracts, and about $300K in annual recurring revenue. And then in 22, we sold Campus Logic to a strategic acquirer. At that point, we were approaching 50 million in ARR. We had seven products in the market. We had about 800 colleges and universities we were working with. We were finally working with colleges and universities that people had heard of. In the early days, everyone was like, hey, we've never heard of these schools. They don't have a basketball team. They don't have a football team. And by the end, we worked with schools like ASU, like Ohio State, USC, Purdue. You know, again, lots of schools you would have heard of. But so we had this engine going for product development, as you can tell, where we rolled out products almost on a yearly basis. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But so prioritizing what to do within those products, when to build the next product, those were a lot of big decision points. So that's a little bit about my background and who I am. I'll let Nate give his intro.
Hi everybody, I'm Nate. Can you guys hear me?
It's not working.
I don't know. Is it on? Testing? No. Probably. Yeah.
Just talk loud.
I have been at Nectar for almost 4 years now. We are an employee rewards and recognition company. Well, we're a culture company now. When I first joined, similarly to Chris, we had one product, and that was the rewards and recognition product. It had just launched. We had like 10 customers. And we had a little bit more than 10 customers, but I joined when we had about 300,000 in revenue, which is very similar to Chris. Now we've got 3 products and we've got over 1,400 customers. We just did Series B fundraise last year where we raised 40 million. We just got named as one of the fastest growing companies in America and the 8th fastest software growing company in America by Inc. 5000, which was pretty fun. So yeah, I've been doing product, and I've known Chris for what, 2 years now?
2 years now, I think.
So we talk a lot about how to prioritize product, and this is going to be a fun conversation.
Thanks. So here's kind of our agenda for today. We want to try and make this as interactive as possible. One is, I know many of you out here in the audience, and many of you could be up here sharing, even sharing better content than what we're going to share today. So we've got some people here in the room that I know are very deep in this subject. But as Nate and I have talked about this, prioritizing product is something that there's lots of different ways to do it. There's lots of different frameworks. If you go out and you're trying to trying to get educated, you get a lot of different ideas, right? So we're going to share with you today our experiences with Campus Logic and Nectar as kind of case studies, but we want to hear, from you also, like the ideas, things that have worked for you in prioritizing products. So we're going to talk about how the stage of company you're in affects how you prioritize product. What are some of the foundations? Sorry. Yeah, exactly. What are some of the foundations or things you should do before you even start thinking about prioritizing product? And then Nate's going to walk us through an interactive case study of Nectar and prioritization from there. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about stage. So one of the challenges I think too with product is based upon where you are in the life cycle of your product and your company, the needs change. How you prioritize is different. If you're prioritizing product at a Fortune 500 company, my guess is you're spending a lot of time in spreadsheets, and really prioritization there at those companies is more about building consensus, defending what you're doing, and it tends to be a lot more political. And so I always joke that when prioritization gets to that point is the time for me to move on. But if you're pre-MVP, if you're pre-product, if there's anybody in the room, because sometimes we have some folks that come that are like, hey, I've got an idea, I'm going to be building something. What I always say to pre-product founders when I meet them when it comes to prioritization is I'm like, you should just leave right now. You shouldn't be here. What you should be doing is you should be working with a customer right now. Okay, you should be talking to a customer right now. You should be building a prototype, getting it in front of them, talking to them, and figuring out what's my fastest path to getting a product to market. And so that's always my little caveat, because we gave a workshop one time on how to build and deliver software, and we shared a lot of the principles from Campus Logic. And I had this founder come back to me a couple weeks later, and he was like, "Hey, I implemented what you told us to do, and we didn't get any faster." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, let's talk about it a little bit." And I found out he was pre-product. It was him and another engineer. And I was like, oh, all that process stuff I was talking about, you should throw that away. Just sit next to your engineer and build software, and you'll be a lot faster. So the stage you're at does matter quite a bit. So I have a framework that I used at Campus Logic as we were building product that, again, I thought I'd walk you through quickly today. This is what I call Chris's product market fit framework. Okay. And so based upon where you are in the journey, I always say there is an ultimate priority, right? There's one thing that's more important than anything else. That's your imperative at that stage. And there's some markers you can look for, or these are the markers we look for. So when you're at the MVP stage, you're trying to get something into market, nobody's using it yet. You're trying to just get that first version out there, maybe a beta. You're just trying to scope the problem. That's the imperative. Right? You're just trying to figure out what exactly it is that the customer needs. What's that key value prop? Where are the core use cases? And the goal there, the priority there is to launch, right? And so that should be the lens that you look at everything by, is like, what do we have to do to launch to get into market? Once you're into market, you're starting to sell to people. I always say sales is the number one goal, right? Growth is the number one goal. So your imperative here is to get deals, right? So you're prioritizing according to what's going to help us acquire more customers. What are we going to do in the product that helps us identify a common customer or an ideal customer profile? And so the metric that I was always looking at was, what was our monthly growth of MRR, monthly recurring revenue, right? So again, I know that there may be some in the room that have different types of businesses. Nate and I are definitely B2B SaaS people. You're going to hear us talk in SaaS terms quite a bit, okay? So looking at that growth in MRR, looking at, are we getting deals, getting feedback from the sales process, that's the imperative at that point. So until we have that, I don't worry about anything else, right? That's the problem we're solving. That's the imperative that I'm going after. The next one is efficient onboarding. You get a motion going in sales, you start signing customers. The next pain point everybody runs into is, man, we're struggling to get them live on the product, or it takes an army. Or when I got to Campus Logic with those first few customers, start asking about how we onboard, and they're like, well, so we give this spreadsheet to the customer and they put a bunch of values in there, and then I give it to engineering and they set the product up. I'm like, okay, that we're gonna have to fix right away. Okay, so the next step in our journey to product market fit is we're able to acquire customers at a good clip. Can we get them using the product? And the measures that we're looking for, I've used some abbreviations here, so I'll try to clarify here. So time to value, TTV. So your product has some value proposition. When you're looking at onboarding, how do we shorten the path to the customer getting value? How do we get them live, basically, if you're in a more B2B enterprise world? It'll typically be like, how do we get them live, right, in the shortest amount of time? So your product should enable that, was always my belief. And so we would prioritize what we were putting into the product by, are we driving time to value down, and the cost to implement, my CTI. So again, how efficient are we at onboarding? Can we do it fast and can we do it cheap? All right. And again, until we get to that point, we shouldn't be worrying about anything else. All right. So my next priority was early adoption. So I got them live. Are they using it? Are they getting the value? Have we removed the friction from the user using the product? Typically, again, if you've launched an MVP to prove that there's a market for your idea, it's not always optimal, right? Like now people start using it and you find out like, oh, this is a little clunkier than I thought it was. This was great in Figma, doesn't quite work in the real world. So that's going to become the priority. So how do we start getting the adoption that we want? And this one, there's not necessarily a specific metric in my mind. It's product specific. Okay. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is contextual to your product and your circumstances. But so what are the key behaviors that I need from my users to get value? So I'll give you an example of, so with our first product at Campus Logic was called Student Forms. So it digitized all the paperwork required for somebody to go through the financial aid process that for most schools was still being done by fillable PDFs and imaging systems. All right, so what was our key behavior that we needed? We needed students to upload their documents. We needed them to go through the process. So that was the metric we were looking to drive. And then on the school side, in order to do the processing we needed to do, we needed them to upload the output of the financial aid application. So if you go to fafsa.gov, that's a government site, you fill out your financial aid application, the government sends an electronic record to the school. Got to get that into the system, and you got to get that matched to these documents that are coming in to finish the financial aid process. So those were the numbers we started looking at. Is like, are we getting that adoption? Are we driving those behaviors? And over time, what the key behavior is may shift, but there's some key behavior. There's something you need the user to do. That's the North Star at that point, and you try to prioritize what you're building according to that. So a lot of founders. This is coaching when you come and talk to investors. A lot of founders come to me and tell me they've got product market fit. They're like, we totally have product market fit. We've signed 10 customers. I'm like, okay. How long have they been using? Oh, well, they're onboarding right now. I'm like, okay, you don't have product market fit. You have message market fit. In other words, the messaging of your product gets people to buy it. You don't have product market fit, in my opinion, until people continue to use your product, until they renew, until they pay you the second time. Okay, so that's where we would start to look at, okay, and there's a lot of connection to this early adoption, right? If there's friction and there's not adoption in the product, you'll run into problems here. But most companies find that, like, okay, we're acquiring customers, we can onboard them pretty well, it looks like people are using it, but wow, those 10 customers, 7 of them renewed the product, 3 didn't. It's like, okay, what's going on here, right? So the next hurdle to get over is how to get people to renew. Okay, so this is where you start again refining the product, making sure that customers feel the value so that they'll renew. And I'm normally looking at things like either a gross retention rate. Again, this is going to be contextual a little bit based on your market, your contract size, and the type of contracts that you have. Like if you're on a month to month, then I'm probably looking more at each monthly cohort, how many are coming back each month, right? So either looking at cohort renewal rate, and so to be really pedantic, so that's like a group of customers that all bought at the same time, they're up for renewal at the same time, how many of them actually did, right? Whereas gross retention, normally looking at that on a little bit longer time frame, okay? But so again, until people are buying again, you may still not have exact product market fit. All right. Any questions? Yeah. Before I jump. Yeah.
At what stage did you join Campus Lodge? MVP sales?
Right in between for the first product. Yeah. But then I iterated through this 6 more times in 6 years. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. So a little bit of the Campus Logic story, and if Greg were here, he would tell you this. So I actually, when I got there, they were on the second MVP. The first MVP they built completely failed, crashed and burned with the school. It didn't work. If you put more than 2 students on it at a time, it wouldn't run. And Greg actually had to perform the work manually for the school for a year, with like an outsourcer, because they had to scrap the product, and they did a complete rewrite of the product. So I got there right after the rewrite. And so yeah, when I got there, we had 2 customers that were using it, and they just started using it a couple months before. So we ran into all of these problems. Like I said, I got there, and it was like, hey, I need engineers to onboard. Well, that's not going to work. It takes 3 months to get somebody live. Well, that's too long. That's not going to work. The next thing I ran into after being there a couple months was, hey, only half the students are getting their documents in on time. Okay, how about we implement text reminders, SMS reminders to students, which was, again, it was 2014, 2015. That was a pretty advanced idea. That was like Star Wars to school. They were like, you're going to text them? Yes. And by the way, once we started texting them, then the rate of students who got their documents in on time was 90%, right? It made a huge difference. So to give you some context of or practical examples of what that might look like. Again, it's going to vary based upon your product. So now we've got people renewing at a good rate. We're onboarding them pretty well. You can continue to optimize, right? And get better and better at all of these things. But usually at that point in your company, now you start to look at, well, okay, now we want to expand. We want to grow, okay? So I find that for us, at least, there were like 3 paths we could go down to grow. Okay, so I'll talk about each one of these. So the first one is grow our TAM. So TAM is your total addressable market. There's a couple of different ways to grow TAM. One is you can expand your ideal customer, right? So move to another segment, customer segment. So that's selling the same product to different customers. Okay, so for example, I had someone early on look at our student forms product, and they said, you know what? This document collection piece, this would work great for real estate transactions. So they're like, why don't you go into real estate transactions? And so without going into all the strategic conversations around that, we were like, well, no, that's stupid, because we were selling to school. So then you could look at expanding your ICP either by the segment or looking at another vertical. So that would have been going into real estate, or maybe geographies. For some companies, this wasn't going to work for us because the financial aid process is not the same in other countries. But maybe you have an opportunity to go into North or South America or go global, right? So those would be ways you could grow your addressable market with the same product. So there, your metrics are going to be, your North Star metrics are going to be the percentage of TAM expansion, and then just expansion of it, right? So that's one path to grow. Another path to grow, and this is the path we chose, was to go multi-product. Okay, so this is basically selling different products, but I always say sell different products to the same customer. I'm not a big fan of selling different products to different customers. The reason being is now you need go-to-markets for each one of those. It's not the most efficient way to grow. But if you've built a good product and you're getting good renewal with that customer, and you're listening, they'll tell you the other problems that they have, right? And give you other opportunities to build another product and then cross-sell them. So this is where you're looking for, what are the adjacent jobs to be done? Can we build out a suite? So Nate talked about the fact that he said, well, we're a rewards and recognition company. He's like, no, we're a culture company. Well, the reason is because they've started working with their ICP, those 1,400 customers. Those 1,400 customers have given them other problems that they're having, other jobs to be done around building a good company culture, which has led to more product development. So in that case, you're starting to look at, well, what's our average revenue per account? So what's the share of wallet within the customer, and how are we growing that? So that became our North Star metric. That's where you see, like in the chart I just showed you, where we started ramping products. And by the end, those 800 schools we were working with, the average number of products that that they had was 3, right? So we still had a lot of room to grow even within our current customer base. But you take advantage of the brand that you've built, the go-to-market that you've built, the knowledge of the customer that you have. And then if you're really good, you've figured out a way to where if you have 2 of your products together, there's some synergy, right? So 1 + 1 = 3. We actually didn't find that to be the case with our products. There wasn't necessarily an advantage to using multiple together, but when you can find that, that's another great way to grow. Anyway, that's where you start to focus on, well, what's our growth within the current customer base. And then there was another option we looked at, and this does work for some, is you just work on being profitable, right? You've got a product, you've got a good sized market. You feel like, hey, we can continue to grow within this market. So we're going to sell the same product to the same customer, but we're going to really work on how do we drive our margins? How are we going to drive our efficiency? So it's a little bit different. It's a little different product strategy, right? I'm going to optimize what I have so that I can do it faster and cheaper, and just ride this thing, okay? And so in that case, you're focused on things like gross margin, market share, things like that, okay? So we took the middle path, but so I tell most founders that I talk to today, get the first slide working first before you start thinking about this, because everyone wants to start thinking about this, right? Most entrepreneurs are like, yeah, let me think about the next product. Let me think about the next market, the next opportunity, the next, when they haven't gotten the first one really nailed down, okay? Any other questions?
Yeah. Product market fit.
Product market fit. Yeah, sorry. Product market fit. All right. So the one thing that I always believe is important to do before you start prioritizing what you build in your product is having some sense of what the product really is. So I call this the product identity. Some people will call it a product strategy. You'll find different terms. By the way, this is where I'll make a plug. So this gentleman sitting back here in the back, Anthony here, if you find him afterwards and you're looking for a software that can help you do this, a platform for managing your product strategy, he's got a really interesting tool for you. He'd love to talk to you, all right? We don't normally sales pitch in here, but I'll help Anthony out there because he's building something that will help you do something very similar to this. But this is what we called our product identity canvas. I always wanted to have an identity for my product. That identity is important because that became what I bounced everything against. What my product is and what my product isn't. Who's it for and who's it not for. When they came to me and they said, hey, we see an opportunity to go into real estate, I was like, no, it's not the identity of the product, right? So your identity, I always say, is there's a really easy format that I would always use of like, product name does X for Y so they can Z. So it does what for somebody so that they can achieve an outcome, right? So X for Y for Z was our high level kind of identity. And then what was our point of view? So this describing what our product is going to do for somebody. You know, what's the status quo today? What's going to be after they use our product? Again, this could be aspirational. Your product your MVP may not do everything that's here on this canvas, but this is the direction that you're going, okay? This is the container or the parameters that you're going to build within, right? What are your customer segments? Again, most people have not narrowed down their customer segments enough to start, right? Everybody starts too big. So you want to find what's the ideal customer by size, by business, by persona, and then where we will not focus is important. Actually being explicit of like, where will we not sell today? Now, getting your salespeople to adhere to that is a whole nother conversation, a whole nother workshop. But as a product person, you have to have really clear in your mind who we're selling to and who we're not selling to, okay? The musts to win. I call these the things that like, what is the thing that our product has to do that will enable it to win in the marketplace, okay? This is these are the differentiators, right? This is what will make that point of view actually happen. And then what are the other capabilities that we need and what's going to be the customer value? So if you've got these things outlined, now when you're looking at a set of features, requests that come in from different places, now you've got something that a lens to look through for that prioritization. Does that make sense? So I built out a quick example with another one of our products. It's a product called Scholarship Universe. Okay, so Scholarship Universe is a scholarship management software application for colleges and universities so that they can disperse financial aid or disperse aid to their students. Okay, so the point of view was today, just to give you a little quick background on scholarship management. So did anybody get us? You can brag. Did anybody get a scholarship when they went to school? Yeah, okay. See, I got a bunch of smart people here. Okay. Most of you, I'm guessing, probably got that scholarship offered to you as part of the admissions process. Okay. But there's a whole world of different types of scholarships that you can get. There's private scholarships from different foundations and businesses and individuals. There's literally thousands of them out there. There are departmental scholarships. There are endowed scholarships. So this is where somebody's given the school money and set up a scholarship for them. And some of them are crazy, right? University of Purdue has a scholarship for descendants of an astronaut. Kid you not. Why? More astronauts have graduated from Purdue than any other university. I've seen scholarships for left-handed students. I've seen scholarships. My son's roommate is from Oregon. He's going to Hillsdale College in Michigan. He found a scholarship for someone from Southern Oregon attending Hillsdale. How does a student find these? How do they know what to look for, right? So this was the friction we identified with scholarships is you ask a student, have you tried to find any scholarships? And they'll say like, nah, I went out and searched a little bit and it's a real pain, because you don't know what to search for. So you get back this list of scholarships. You have to go comb through each one and figure out whether you even meet the requirements for it before you apply. And then you got to fill out the application, get the letters of recommendation, and there's no guarantee that you'll get the money. So most students are like, why even try? So there's a lot of scholarship money that doesn't get used. For the schools, if you have endowed scholarships, someone's donated money to your school, and you don't award it, which University of Pittsburgh found a scholarship that was sponsored by Johnson & Johnson that they hadn't given to any student in 15 years. It makes it really hard to go back to Johnson & Johnson and ask for them to donate more money for any reason on campus, right? So fund utilization was a metric that they were concerned with. Anyway, so that's a little bit of context of what we were trying to do with Scholarship Universe. So we said, what are the must-wins for this product to really differentiate itself? And so we said, well, one, we needed a vetted database of private scholarships. So there were lots of different scholarship databases out there. Most of them were crappy. And you'd be surprised how many scholarships you find online are actually a scam to harvest your data or to get you to join a class action lawsuit, all kinds of crazy stuff. So we said, we need a curated, vetted database of scholarships. And then the next thing we said we needed was, instead of having students search for scholarships, we're going to have them match to scholarships. In other words, the system needs to do that work for the student of, are you eligible for these scholarships? So we built an adaptive matching engine for that. And then if you want to really win with universities, you find out that universities are actually fiefdoms, or like all the colleges within the school operate differently. So the system has to be able to support different models of managing scholarships within the same school. So we built this in partnership with the University of Arizona. And so they helped us with what needs to happen so that the engineering school's process is different than the liberal arts process. And there's a lot of complexity to that. So those were our 3 must-wins. And then I won't go through all of it. This deck will be available if you're curious. You can go back and look at it. But these were other core functions that were just table stakes, what the product needs to have. And then what's the customer value? So I always tried to map the product to what metric of my customers is my product going to drive. That's the most important metric, right? Not how many logins I get, not how many daily active users I have. Those are the metrics a lot of product people look at. And I'm like, those don't really matter. What are my customers' metrics that my product's going to move? And that's how we're going to build our product. Okay. So that was our quick. So we had one of these for each product, and you revisit it often because it's going to change. It's going to evolve, right? You're going to find out things, especially the earlier on you are, the more this is going to change over time, because who the ideal customer is going to evolve as you get out there and talk to people. You're going to find that there's something that we need in the product that's a must-win, right? So it's a living thing, but it became the framework, the starting point before we talked about any priorities. Okay, yeah. Normally, just the product name, people have a lot of opinions on that. We wanted the product name to tell people what the product did. So that was kind of it for us. But usually I actually had the product name before we even knew what it was going to do. Now, I will share that University of Arizona had built something that they called Scholarship Universe, and so I licensed the name from them because I like the name. Because the idea was it's the universe of all scholarships, right? But student forums, it's pretty easy to figure out what that does. Campus communicator, kind of get what that does. Virtual advisor, you know, we were pretty on the nose with our naming, but
how the operator was in terms of undertaking that process of the scholarship universe. Did you have to speak to your main point of contact who was running scholarship universe there, and then in terms of coordinating that was that individual, like you have a template, now we go off of this, or did you have to do individual feedback with the different?
we aggregated with a single point. And that, yeah, and happy to chat more with that afterwards about some of the. There was a very strategic decision there. Other players in the marketplace were selling right to the individual fiefdoms, and we did not. That was another choice we made over here. As we said, we are not going to sell just to the engineering department. And I won't go into all the reasons for that, but that was a key belief. And so we sold at the enterprise level when others didn't. We displaced most of them. It's not sequential. It's all over. It's back and forth, up and down. Yeah.
I was guessing at a first pass you want to go.
I mean, POV is the one that I would say you want to have the point of view first.
Yeah.
Of like, because your point of view is really like there's a problem in this world, right, or a current state in this world that we think should change, and this is how we think it should change. And so you do that is probably first. These others are kind of messy, right? Because you got to go out and sometimes figure it out. But I would say, yeah, the name and the basic statement and the POV come first, and then after that, it's back and forth. All right. Somehow I got that in there twice. Okay. And then the last thing, I'm going to turn it over to Nate because I've taken too much time, is just we had a software delivery process that was based upon principles of continuous delivery. We called it Fluid. We ship code to at least one of our products every day. So we were shipping all the time. We didn't use deadlines. We didn't use sprints. We were flow-based on how we delivered software, which is, again, a whole nother workshop, which we give to. But because of that changed the way we prioritize, or it enabled a certain way of prioritizing, where we were literally looking at priorities on a daily basis and planning on very short cycles, right? So I called it continuous prioritization. So literally each day we would say, like, how much room is there on our board? That's how many items would go on the board that day. We didn't say, like, okay, we didn't push. A lot of product development is, I want to get these 10 things done. Here you go, engineering. We need to get these 10 things done. We let the engineering capacity pull from us, right? So engineering now has capacity for one thing. Okay, pull that one thing on. So we're doing continuous prioritization, which again is a whole nother topic. But so we tried to basically have our big roadmap of what are we going to do, what are we doing now, what are we going to do next, and then all the future stuff. And I didn't plan out quarters or months or years in advance. We would set one strategic OKR at a time. So, like, what's our objective right now? And again, you could use that framework, but to help drive what that is. And we would do it until it's done. That might be a quarter. That might be a month, right? Some people will say do a quarterly OKR. That's fine. Like, again, some of these things are your context and the way you like to operate. But I'm just explaining what we were doing was we were saying, like, okay, there's one important thing to do right now based upon what our goal is, and we're going to do that until it's done. And if it takes us a week, great. If it takes us 6 months, great. But if it's really the most important thing, then we're not going to worry about it. We're going to do it until it's done. And so we would check in on that at least on a monthly basis. This is normally where we might revisit some of our priorities too, right? Like, maybe we learned something new, maybe we got feedback, and so we'd be revisiting each month. And then also, if you're a product person or a founder working with a small team, I highly recommend, like, one of the mistakes I made as a new product person was I thought I had to set all the priorities. That was my job. And so I would come to the meeting with the list of priorities instead of working with the team on what the priorities were. So collaborative prioritization. I already talked about, doing things continuously. So spending a lot of time with customers, and Nate's going to talk a little bit about how you can get customer feedback. And then I mentioned the daily huddles where each day we were seeing what's the next little incremental thing we're going to add. So we were constantly adding them, constantly shipping them. One of the things about that, and Nate's going to touch on this too, is the more often you ship and the smaller you ship, the easier it is to prioritize. I always say that's for two reasons. One is each decision, the stakes are lower, right? If you're shipping small and you're shipping often, then the decisions are less make or break. When I started off my career and I was working in an environment where we were doing quarterly releases, well, man, the prioritization was really stressful because it was like, hey, if I miss, it's gonna be a quarter until I get this fixed, right? Whereas if you're shipping every day, it's like, well, let's do it. Because if it's wrong, we'll fix it tomorrow. I used to say that to my team all the time. Let's ship it today and fix it tomorrow. It's fine. So it brings down the table stakes of prioritizing. And the second one is if you're constantly releasing value, you're going to get better feedback, and your prioritization is going to get easier because you're going to have better feedback, right? So shipping more often makes prioritization easier is the last thought I'll leave with you, and I'll then flip it over to Nate to talk a little bit about Nectar and our case study.
All right. Woo. Now that we're done talking about university stuff and all that boring scholarship stuff. I'm just kidding.
Hey, we're just helping schools change lives.
We do Nectar. We try to make company cultures better. We try to make it a place where people don't want to leave. But before we got to that, we had quite the journey, and I kind of wanted to outline our journey to give you guys some context, because I always hate going to a presentation. It's like, man, they just raised Series B funding and they're crushing it. And it's like, man, that just happened so fast. And the reality is it didn't. Most companies are building underground for a long, long time, trying to find their product market fit. And then they do one day. And even then, it still takes a while. And then it starts to take off. So to give you guys some context, the CEO of Nectar, his name is Trevor Larson. He's actually my brother-in-law. So I knew about Nectar since the beginning. And he was in college. He went up to, he was ASU, started at ASU, but then he was like, I need to go up to Utah, probably to find a wife or something. And came up to Utah. He was doing school online. And he never really had a job in the traditional sense. He was always a bit entrepreneurial. And in Arizona, he had this little car detailing business. And so he brought it up to Utah, except he knew no one in Utah. He didn't have a network of people who wanted their cars detailed. But he found a little niche in the market and found out that he could go to these big companies like Qualtrics and Vivint, companies that were near the Provo area. And he could go to them and say, hey, I detail cars. Would you mind just making an announcement to your employees? I'll give them a sign-up sheet and they can sign up to get their cars detailed while they're at work. And I'll just come and I'll do it in the parking lot while they're at work, and they can get their car detailed. Excuse me. So he started doing that. It was great. Go to Qualtrics, and sorry, I'm going to mention Qualtrics a few times. If you don't know Qualtrics, they're a very big company in Utah. They sold for like $8 billion, and the owner of Qualtrics now owns the Utah Jazz and the hockey team that we stole from Arizona. And so Trevor was doing these cars. He'd be doing like the CEOs, really, really nice cars and stuff. And then they were like, some people have like rock chips on their windshields. What if we added that as a service as well? And so it was like they were starting to do a bunch of services on site for people. And Trevor had the idea, and he was like, man, I go on site to these companies, but there's all kinds of on-site services that other companies offer. On-site haircuts, on-site oil changes, they'll fill up your car with gas, all kinds of just on-site services. So what if he called me up and said, what if we built an app that could house all these on-site services, and we could package this up and we could sell this as a service to these companies? And I was in school at the time, and I was an IT major, and he was a biology major because he was going to be a dentist or an orthodontist. And I said, yeah, I don't really love the idea. I'm out. He said, okay, I'm going to go build it without you. And I said, okay. So he tried to go do that, and didn't really work out. But he iterated, pivoted to product B over here, which was kind of this idea, but it was including other perks, because he went to companies and was like, hey, can I build this for you? And they were like, well, yeah, but we have all these other perks that we offer to employees and they don't know where to find them, et cetera. What if we threw those in there as well? He's like, okay, let's do that. And then some companies like Qualtrics were really big and they had a lot of perks, but then you go to other companies and they're really small and they don't have very many perks. And they're like, wait, can't you help source some perks for us? And so then it was like, okay. So essentially it turned into this perks platform. We called it Perk Now. Actually, it was called Perk City, but then we called it Perk Now. And we got like a bunch of discounts to food places. And it essentially turned into a discount app. And that was fine. We sold it to a few big customers. doTERRA, I think Qualtrics ran for a little bit, Entrada, these are Utah companies. And it was like, man, these are big accounts. We might have something here. We might have product market fit. Hired a few people, started really trying to sell this throughout the valley. And we did sell it pretty well throughout the valley. But we realized, okay, to scale this beyond Utah Valley, it's going to take quite a bit of effort here. And then we ran into our first cancellation. The renewal came up for a customer, and our customer that had the absolute best usage out of any customer was not going to renew with us. And we're like, oh shoot, we do not have product market fit. So then I iterated again to product C. We were talking to HR and they're like, we have rewards that we give out to people, but they're just gift cards in the desk and whatnot. And it's hard to manage these. It's hard to account for them. It would be nice if we had a platform where we could just load money in, assign it to managers, and then managers could give out rewards. And we're like, oh yeah, what if we did these gift cards digitally? And so that's what this turned into. You could load up some money and assign different managers different budgets, and they could send a link to their employee and say, great job, thank you. Here's a little gift card. And that was okay. We had a few customers on it. Once again, best customers with the most usage didn't want to renew. And then we pivoted again to, man, it's a little washed out here, to our fourth product, which is recognition and rewards. And that's where we found the magic, was when you had rewards and you pair it with recognition, some magic happens there. There have been companies that have tried just recognition without rewards, and it's fun and it's great, but it kind of falls flat. And if you do just the rewards, people are like, oh, this is great, but then it starts to fall flat after a little bit because they're like, this is basically just a part of my paycheck now. But when you pair those two things together, some magic really happens. And so our platform here is everyone gets a certain amount of points at the beginning of the month. So you see I have 20 points to give left for the month. And I give these out through a shout out right here. And man, it's really washed out. I'm sorry. But yeah, I have to like add a person. So I'm like, okay, @Lance, thanks so much for helping me on that project. You were instrumental in doing XYZ for the customer. It really helped us out. And we landed the account. Thanks so much, plus 10 points. And then I send that shout out, and Lance gets a notification, and the shout out then appears down here, and people can come in and they can like it, and they can comment on it, they can add other points on. It became kind of this social feed within the company to recognize each other. And this is kind of what it looks like today. We've iterated a little bit, but that's what the product turned into. So I wanted to explain that to you because there's a lot of just kind of going through this wilderness of like what works, what doesn't work, trying things, building things, failing, iterating, pivoting, and that's all part of the process. And then once you get to some sort of product market fit, that's when you really start to need to prioritize different things because you're adding more customers, different customers have different needs, and it's very different. Prioritizing is very different in the B2B space compared to like a consumer space. So if I were a product manager at Facebook, I would probably have a different method for how I prioritize things because they're a consumer product. They're not selling to businesses. They're main metric that they go off of is engagement, because engagement in their platform translates to more people on their platform, which translates directly to revenue. We're kind of similar to Facebook in the fact that we're a social network within the company, but if I just focused on an engagement, I wouldn't grow the company's revenue, because we would just keep the revenue we currently have, but we wouldn't go and get new customers, because new customers have different needs, because they're in the manufacturing industry, or they're in the software industry, or healthcare, biotech. They all have different needs. And so that all comes into account when you're prioritizing things. Does anyone have an example of some piece of technology that's cool that you think led to like a poor product? Like, it's cool technology, but the product's like, I'll show you my example.
Segway.
Segway.
That was a good one.
That's actually a really good one. My example was these freestyle machines. I raise a hand. Who likes these machines? Who doesn't like them? I mean, who likes them first? You can say yes. It's okay. Yeah. Who doesn't like them? Okay, we got some differences of opinion here, which I like. And when I showed Chris these slides, he's like, wait, I love this machine. Why is it a bad product? I think it's a bad product because I think it solves the wrong problem. Sorry, I'm ahead on my slides here. I think the problem that Coke was trying to solve ultimately was, how can we sell more soda syrup, which is essentially how can we get more revenue? And they're like, you know what? If we came up with this machine that has all the options, we would sell more syrup, because everyone would have to buy all the syrups. And man, I just really am ahead of my slides. Hypothesis one is like, if we give users more options, we'll have to buy more syrup to service all these options. Or the second one is, giving more people more options drives people to purchase a Coke or a drink more than if there were only a limited amount of options. And here's the problem I think they should have solved. How do we help our customers sell more beverages? Now, maybe they were trying to solve this problem, but the reason I think the freestyle product is a bad product is because, well, there's a few reasons. One, the syrup quantities that you put into the machine are much smaller, because you have to service all these options. And therefore, you actually run out of the syrup much faster. So when you go to the machine, you're like, oh yeah, they have a freestyle machine. Sweet, I can get that Dr. Pepper with cream and the perfect amount of vanilla that I want and all that stuff. And you go buy it, and then they're like, oh, it's out of this, it's out of that. Dang it, now I have to choose something else. Well, I didn't want this anyway. Okay, I'm defaulting to regular Dr. Pepper or whatever. So you're kind of giving a bad experience to the end user. The second thing is, there's only one fountain here. You can't service multiple people. Like, there's some places with, like, you go to the gas stations, like a Circle K or something, there's like the Quick Trip, there's like a whole row of fountains. And you can have 5 people going to get their soda. Well, at these, not only is there only one, but you have all these options. So some person goes and gets their drinks, and they're just browsing through all the options. And then you get like this, you know how when you're not watching Netflix at night, you're like, okay, what should we watch tonight? And you flip through like 5, 6, 7, 10 different shows, and you're like, okay, now we're gonna watch this one. And it's already midnight, whatever. There's too many options. The time to value is too long. And so when people see that there's these machines in there, they're like, all right, I'm not even getting a drink because it's gonna take too long to get the drink. So I'm not gonna get a drink, which actually does not work out for the business, because the business makes most of their money on drinks, not the food. So if the business isn't selling drinks, then Coke's not selling syrup, the business is suffering. And I actually see companies pull these machines out and put the old fountains back in, because those fountains help move product, help customers buy the drinks. And that's why I believe this is a poor product. Did I convince everybody or no? Okay. So prioritization is not about what feature should we build next. That's what is pretty commonplace to hear. But it's really about what problem should we solve next. Because there's a lot of things you could build, but the problems are what you want to solve. That's what's really going to give the value to the customer. And this is something that you improve over time. It is not going to come all at once one day. You're not going to know how to do it. In fact, I don't think it actually gets easier. I think you just get better at it, but the decision is always hard. Speed is your only advantage. This is something I talk to my team about almost daily. I'm like, look, there are other companies out there. We have competitors. They have way more money. They raised way more money than us. They have more people on their team. Our main competitor has, I think, 12 product and engineering teams at least, the very least, and we have 2. So they are just way better resource than us. How are we going to compete with that? Our only advantage is speed. If you think your advantage is like, oh, I have this great idea, whatever. No, we live in a world where anyone can copy anything and they can do it quickly. So if you are fast and faster than your customers, you can get to market faster. You can get feedback faster. You can iterate faster, start solving the problem faster. And if you can do all that faster, you will get paid for it. I liken prioritization to baseball because there's a lot of people out there that are like, hey, there's these great frameworks for prioritization. You list out all the things, but in the end, it's like a pitch that's coming at you. You have to be ready for it. You have to kind of eyeball it a little bit. Who's seen the movie Moneyball? Yeah, okay, everyone's all seen it. So the premise of the movie, right, is, okay, they're the Oakland A's. They don't have a lot of money. They're the little guy, but they want to win a World Series. And so they break down the analytics of the game. Okay, who can get a single? Who's really good at getting on first base? Who can get a double? Where can we get this win here? Where can we get that win here? And they break it down to small wins. And when they break it down to small wins, all these things start to add up. And spoiler alert, they win the World Series. But that's so similar to how you need to do things in product. Like Chris was saying, you can't prioritize on a quarter-by-quarter basis and ship on a quarter-by-quarter basis. It's just too big of a chunk. You're taking too big of a risk. You need to dial it down to something smaller that it's okay if you miss, if you swing and you miss, because it wasn't that big of a deal. You can quickly do it again, change directions, etc. And so that's how I liken it to Moneyball. So my framework here is, these are all the things that I take into account when trying to prioritize. So the first one is, okay, how big is the problem? Not how big is the feature, how big is the problem? The feature could actually be really small. The problem might be very big. So if we can size up the problem, then we can kind of get a gauge on like, okay, this is the biggest problem for our customer and this one is really small. We don't need to touch the really small one. If we go solve this one, they're going to pay us for it, which leads into value. How much value are we creating for the customer if we solve this problem? What are the benefits to Nectar? Meaning, okay, this is a really big pain point for this person over here, but they don't have the budget or whatever to actually pay you for it. So if you can build it for free, yeah, they're going to use it. You're going to have to figure out some other way to monetize. So at the intersection of how much value does it solve for the customer and how much value does it bring to you, that's the sweet spot. And then how much does it cost to build this thing? Now, this is one that you need a lot of interaction with your engineering team to really gauge this. Because most engineers, they will think about it in an ideal way. Okay, we need to build this system like this. Okay, how are we going to do that? So for an example, as part of our rewards, we have all kinds of things. We have gift cards, we have swag, we have an integration to Amazon, and we have just a lot of rewards. But one reward that kept coming up was, I want to cash my points out to PayPal. That would be really great because I can use PayPal on all kinds of things. We said, okay, that could be a lot of work. That's a lot of work. What's a way we could do that? And so we started looking into PayPal's API and how we could integrate with them. And that's like, first thought, that's the path we should go down, just integrate with PayPal. Well, we're kind of a small fry for PayPal. They're a really big, tens of billions dollar company. They probably don't really want to work with us. If they do, and what I found out working with a lot of these big companies like Amazon and stuff is, when you're a small fry and you have questions, they do not care. It's like, look, yeah, we know our API is not that good and it doesn't do all these things. I don't care. You figure it out or just don't work with us because they don't need you. And so we're like, man, okay, this PayPal thing, their API is really crappy. It's going to take a lot of time. We scoped like 6 to 8 months to build this. We could go build this and it would take 6 to 8 months and we could deliver PayPal to our customers. Okay. And we didn't have a solution right then of which direction we wanted to go. So we basically said, let's wait on this. But I have a really good relationship with our gift card partner. And I was like, guys, these gift cards are great, but it would be, we get asked about PayPal all the time. So I'm starting to think that we might integrate with PayPal. And they're like, whoa, wait a second. Actually, we're talking with PayPal too. We're trying to integrate with them so you can just integrate through us. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. You guys integrate with them already. We're integrated with you, and it's just a pass through. And so a few months later, PayPal released with our gift card provider, and we were able just to do a few things that took 2 days, and we were up and running with PayPal. It was like the biggest hack ever, but it provided an immense value to our customer. And there's so many examples like that within Nectar where it's like, man, how could we provide this value to customers without having to have it cost a lot of money and time? Another example is with Teams. So this is a secret that I'm going to let you in on. We have the best Microsoft Teams integration out of anyone in the employee recognition space. The other players in the space, they have these chat bots that you interact with and you kind of chat with, and they're clunky, and most people don't like to use them because they don't really understand them. And we were thinking about it, and we were looking at Teams one day, and we're like, man, how could we integrate with Teams? And like the default thinking was these chat bots. Well, I'm kind of poking around on Teams, and it turns out you can like create a team, and then you can, at the top, they have these tabs, and you can add a tab to a team, and they allow you to do an iframe. It's called embed. You click embed, and it's like, all right, type in the website you want. I'm like, what if we typed in our website? Typed in our website, boom, our entire platform is within Teams just through an iframe like that. And so we're like, this was no work. Created a quick support article, and we started selling it like that. We're like, yep, we have a great integration with Teams. It's so easy. Your customers will love, or your employees will love it. And they had to do nothing. We had to do nothing. And we started winning deals on that feature alone. They're like, you guys have the best Teams integration. We want to go with that. It's not confusing at all. It's literally just an iframe. And our customers still, our competitors still don't know that. We actually took some time a few years later to make it more legit. We created a Teams app, put it in the Teams app store, but it's essentially just the same thing. Took no time at all to whip this thing together, put it in the Teams app store, and it's basically just our iframes platform. Yeah. That's a good question. I feel like we have indexed more on the charging for it and then have gone to free rather than go from free to charging for it. But I've seen companies go the opposite. PayPal's an example. I don't know. It's kind of one of those things you just feel out and feel with customers. And then if it's not catching on, you kind of adjust. And maybe it's, okay, we have 3 different packaging or pricing plans. So we'll try it as an add-on, maybe to see if we can get additional revenue from it. And if it's not working as an add-on, it's like, okay, now we're throwing it in the premium package. And if you want to get that feature, you have to upgrade to the premium package or something like that. Yeah. Chris might have something to say on that.
Yeah, again, because there's a lot of different strategies here. So like for us at Campus Logic, in our context, there were a couple of things. One was our buyers were budget driven, because schools can only buy things that are in the budget, right? And so they were sensitive to those types of add-on fees. The other was because, and you saw, we had designed the whole company around shipping new products and cross-selling those products. So I always used to say, we want you to use the product and use all of it. So we went with all-in pricing. There's no seat licenses, many users as you want, as much storage as you want. One low everyday price, because we wanted adoption on that product so we could cross-sell you more products. So that kind of comes back to knowing what game you're playing, right? Because you can make different decisions. I had a personal bias. I freaking hate tiers as a user, because I always want one feature in the next tier. And I'm like, I got to pay all that. And most of it's garbage that I don't want. So we didn't do that. Oh, sorry. I'm supposed to be on camera. Yeah. But anyway, different perspective because different context, right? So I think that's highly contextual. most features I don't think are worth paying for. But if you can group them into a tier, into a package that makes sense, or if it's a whole new function of the product, then those are the kind of trade-offs I think you have to make.
To give a little more context on our packaging and pricing, we first started with a free tier, and we had what we called the standard, and then we had what we called the plus, which was the third one. And 95% of customers, probably 70% of customers went with the plus package. There were several free, but standard, the middle one, was like not a lot of customers on that one. We ended up removing our free tier because we weren't getting any value from it. We weren't converting customers at a high enough rate, so we ended up getting rid of the free tier. And then we had standard and plus, and almost 98% of our customers were on the plus tier. And the plus was like $4 per employee per month. Well, we wanted to, in Chris's slides, he talks about growing and the different paths of like selling the same product to a different vertical or whatever, multi-product, and then getting more profitable. We've kind of taken all three approaches in some aspects, and we decided to create another third plan. We call it premium, and that one's $6 per employee per month. And we started selling a little bit differently. We put some other features in that one, and now all of the new deals that are coming through, most of them are on the premium plan. So it's just made the deal sizes increase. So I don't know. It's kind of this massaging game that you play.
I'm gonna call on somebody and put them on the spot.
Yeah.
Lance, any thoughts on this from the HubSpot days? Because I know they put a lot of thought into this.
In our case, it was always what you said earlier about iterating with customers. We run it by them and say, what are you willing to pay for?
Yeah.
Rather than just throwing something out. So it's very conversational, very collaborative.
Yeah, I like that. Thanks.
Cool. All right. So we talked about direct cost and then opportunity cost. What if you choose to solve this problem? What are the 99 things you aren't doing? And are one of those other things going to be of greater value? So you got to take all of these things and you got to do all of that calculus in your head. You got to do it fast. Because like a baseball, the opportunity is coming at you fast. You have to know whether that's a curveball, knuckleball, fastball, whatever. But we all know it's coming fast. And if you there's a lot of frameworks out there to say like, oh, here's how you put all these inputs in for all these different things to kind of rank them, whatever. If you do that, and it's going to be because there's a lot of features you could do, a lot of problems to solve. My opinion, anyone that says to do that is wasting a ton of time. Because it takes so long to do that. If you're putting all these inputs in, man, direct cost, you're like, okay, I think it could be this, but my engineering team thinks it could be this. My CEO thinks it could be this. My CFO thinks it could be this. Which one is it? Okay, the value. Okay, and we got to talk to all these customers and triangulate a value that it's going to be, and like trying to put all these inputs in and like spit something else to say, okay, we should do this. Man, that's just going to take way, way too long. And somebody's going to go faster than you. You'll run out of time. You got to get good at eyeballing it. Like that pitch is coming and you're like, all right, I'm seeing all these things. I'm doing all this in my head really fast. And you take a swing and you hope you hit it. You're going to miss though. But that's okay because you're going to take a lot of swings, but you're going to take the small slices. You got to get really good at eyeballing it with all this data. So how do you get good at eyeballing it? Well, you need to have a lot of feedback loops and tight feedback loops. Quick, tight feedback loops are key. So some of the feedback loops are customer interviews, a lot of customer interviews, competitors. What are my competitors doing? As much as we all hate to say it, like we wish we could go build in a vacuum without competitors and really solve the customer problem. In the B2B world, you are competing against these other players and they are grabbing market share. And when they come out with a feature, all of your prospects are looking at that. And that customer or the prospect is talking to your competitor. The prospect is saying, wow, they came out with this thing. Do you guys have that? And you're like, no, that's stupid. And they're like, I don't know. I think it might be important, even though half the time it's not. It's something you have to take into account. Sales demos. When I first started at the company, we had our CEO, there were 3 founders, CEO, and then we had a guy who did all the finances, and we had a guy who did the sales, and then it was myself and 2 engineers. I'll talk more about, I just wanted to give you that context for my next slide. But I got to hear a lot of sales demos because I sat next to the guy who was doing all the demos, and I was getting a lot of demos myself. You got customer requests. Anytime you sign a customer, they're like, hey, this is great, but can it also do X, Y, Z? Got to take those into account. You have product analytics. This is something in the early days I wish I had more of, to really figure out, okay, are people using this feature? Are people using that feature? And then you've got support and bugs. My first, few months, I was doing product design, but I also managed all of support. I was the support chat. When you chatted in for our product, I was the guy. It was so helpful because I could figure out all the little things that were going wrong. Okay, we need to fix this. People are getting confused on this. They don't know how to send a shout out. Oh my gosh, they don't know how to send a shout out? That's like the most basic feature in our product. We need to make that way easier, or we need to educate them better. All of these feedback loops are super, super essential. I just talked about support tickets, but sales demos. So this is our first office. It was just this one room. So there's CEO Trevor, another co-founder Drew. He's the one that did sales. Jack, and then we added a few more sales guys right here. But I was in the room right here, and I could hear every single one of their demos. I could hear all of them. And I could hear, they would like often repeat questions that customers had, so I could hear it as well. Customers like, can you do this? He's like, oh, you're asking if we can do this? Well, we have this other feature, this is how the way around it, whatever it may be. I'm like internalizing all of these things in real time. That's the tightest feedback loop you can possibly get, is like real time like that. We moved to our second office, which was a bit bigger. And then it had some offices over here and then back here. It also had a second floor. Originally, I got put in an office. And after a few months, I was like, man, why do I feel so disconnected? I was like, oh, it's because I'm not hearing all these demos anymore. So I moved my desk to be right here in the middle of all the sales guys again, so I could hear those demos. And this gets harder and harder as you grow. Now we're in our third office. This is a really small part of it. This might be real. But we launched a new product called Comms. I'm the product manager on it. We have another product manager who works on the recognition side. But to get back to our startup roots, we have 2 guys that are selling comms product, and they were on the other side of the building. And we're like, man, we need to get back to our old days. So we moved them right here, and this is all the comms engineering. My desk is over here. We all moved together so we could all hear all of the issues, all of the problems, to make it feel like those really early days when you're sitting right next to your engineer and you're just working on stuff. And so we hear, not only do I hear, but also the engineers hear all the issues or the problems that may be occurring. And we can quickly, after they get off a demo, they're like, okay, this was this demo. This was the things we talked about, blah, blah, blah. And it's like instant feedback. Talking to customers is one of the most important things. It's also one of the hardest things, because as a product manager, they're like, hey, I want this, this, and this. And you're like, yes, I got to delight the customer. I want to give the customer everything that they want. But you can't promise all of that stuff to the customer. Otherwise, the customer's going to be very upset in 6 months when, hey, you promised me you were working on this. Okay, yeah. Something you got to do is to really understand them, hear them. Okay, yeah, I understand that. You have to validate them, essentially. One thing that is super important in product that I think that is just not spoken about a lot, there's 2 kinds of things. One is product managers that do everything their customers tell them. The other one is that doesn't talk to customers, and they're like, I'm Steve Jobs, I know what the customer wants, but I've never talked to them. You're not Steve Jobs. You got to be this like in between, and you got to listen to the customer, find out what the problem is, but then like pull the thread. It's like a thread on your shirt. It's like starting to come undone. You just pull it and you see where it's going, and you might uncover like a bigger problem. Customers like, if we had a button here that did this, that would be awesome. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Why? What are you trying to accomplish there? Oh, if it did this, this, and this, and I want it to go to this other system, whatever. Oh, okay. If we came out with something like this, that would solve this problem, this problem, this problem, and this problem, where this button over here solves like half of the problem. And so you can start to gain insights as to what are the things that will actually solve my customers' problems and how can we build them in an efficient way. Okay, so you're talking to customers, you got all these things, you got all these features, and if you're like me, it's just like this never-ending list of stuff that you should do, maybe you shouldn't do. And you're like, how do I prioritize this all? And you as the product manager, you're like, okay, I'm going through it. This seems like a bad idea. This doesn't work with our ICP. This doesn't work with types of customers we want to go after. Or this one's like for a customer who has people in North Korea and we can't service North Korea because of sanctions, whatever. So then you get down to this list and you're like, okay, unless your name is Chris Chumley and you just can do whatever you want, you have to convince your CEO, sales leader, your CS leader, your CFO of the things you guys should be working on. And they all have different opinions. So you got to get them all aligned on these priorities. If you're not aligned, you're going to be pulling each other in different directions and you're not actually going to be able to move forward. But if you're all aligned, you're going to move forward. And so how do you get them all aligned on these things? Well, getting them in the room and just talking about it sometimes works, but sometimes it's really hard. So I have this method that I use. And this is my previous company that I was at. It was called Sawtooth Software. They do survey software, specialized survey software. And they have what's called a max diff. And a max diff, you put a list of items into it, like a really long list. And the whole point of the max diff is to rank order this max diff and to show you like the weight of the rank order. So what it does is I'm like, okay, I put all the list of all these things in there. And people are usually pretty good at picking like their top 2 or 3, but they don't know by how much they care about it. And they don't know like what the bottom ones are or the middle ones. So you put them into their software. And there's a little QR code if you want to do it for free. I just use the free version. But you put them into the software, and then the software creates these questions. So this is task 1 of 8. And it says, okay, out of these 4 things here, external recognition, purchasing power parity, endpoints, API endpoints, analytics refresh, these are all the projects maybe that we want to do or the problems we want to solve. Out of these 4, if you were just given these 4, which of these 4 is the most important and which one is the least important? And I give this survey to everyone on my executive team and I say, do the survey. And they all hate it. They're like, man, it is so hard because we need to be doing this, but we also need to be doing this. And man, to pick the most important out of all these, okay, maybe it's this, but then to pick the least important, that's like even harder. But you do that, and it goes through like 8 questions. And at the end, it spits out results here. And I've kind of blurred them out because this is future stuff that we're working on. But you can see the top 4 things, like by far and away, people think those are the most important things we should be doing. And this other one down here, this summaries thing, this is actually an AI thing. It's 0.02. This is 26 or something. Like there's that big of a difference on the things that people think we should do and what we shouldn't do. And this helps the team get really aligned around what we should do, what we shouldn't do. But it really is just another data point. This does not determine what we're doing. So in this specific example, actually, the top 2 are exactly tied for first, which is pretty rare. But after I saw this, I was like, okay, this is interesting. But the bottom one right here, I walked in the meeting, I said, guys, this is the results. And they're all like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Everyone kind of gets on the same page. Yeah, okay. Like this one down here, no one cared about. No one wanted to do it. Like basically no one. It's almost at 0. It's like, I know this is a data point, but here are the reasons why I'm moving it to the top of the list. I'm like, we needed it for this, we need it for that. If we come out with this, we're going to blow away our competitors. They're going to be so far behind, blah, blah, blah. And I just explained why we need to do it. And they're all like, yep, let's do that. And I literally just flipped it to the top, even though it did not get any votes at all, essentially. So this is just a data point for you to take in, but it helps that conversation, helps people get aligned really well. That could be part of the reason. Some of the reason is maybe they hadn't thought through some of the consequences, if you will, to building it and why it's so important, or why it's a competitive thing for us right now. And if we don't get it right, somebody beats us to the punch on that, then we're going to be way behind and it's going to be really hard to catch up. Okay, now let's workshop it. Does anyone have an example or a hard thing that they're going through of like, okay, should we do this or that? Anyone have an example that they're working on? And if you don't, Chris is going to give me one. Oh, he didn't think of one.
I'll try and think of one.
Anyone working on a product right now? Okay, you're working on a product. What's your product?
So we do AI bookkeeping, but it's built for the staff accountant. So it's built for the back office of the firm itself.
Okay.
So there's like, not only do you have the AI bookkeeper working, you do categorization, you have, communication cross staff, workflows, right? You integrate a lot of legacy systems.
Okay.
So there are the integration pieces.
Yeah, the integration pieces. Okay, so let's take integrations. How do you decide which integrations worth doing? Which one's first?
So
Name like 4 integrations.
So
QuickBooks?
yeah, QuickBooks.
Heard of it?
Heard of it.
There's a thing called QuickBooks Accountant, right? So in QuickBooks you have your bank feeds, right? And then you have stuff that's already in the book, right? Those are actually 2 separate systems in QuickBooks systems.
Okay.
One is exposed in the API, one isn't exposed in the API. You have 2 different data models, right? So we developed an integration that one's API workflow. It will utilize different parts of those different sets of data, and all of it has to be orchestrated together while our AI needs to run on top of it and automate some of the workflows, right? Competitors don't do it. Partly because it's technically hard, making sure all of it doesn't break, right? Currently, how we're prioritizing integrations is based on like we show it to someone, like our accountants, like they're used to software that doesn't have these integrations, and we show them, hey, we can do this, and they'll ask a set of questions for us, like, hey, can you do this, right? And if that type of integration is possible through our AI agent, then we look at that one, or if we do it more on the API side, we can do that one as well. But that's currently how we're prioritizing.
How many customers do you have?
We have 2 paid customers, 4 total firms. So
Okay.
individual users number about 3 to 4 staff accountants among those firms, and then but underneath each staff accountant, there's like 15 to 25 clients they serve.
Yeah. Why did you guys decide to build the integration into QuickBooks versus like a NetSuite?
Because that's the key. Yeah, so NetSuite is a mid-market and above, right? We operate in the lower mid-market, so at that transition point between where the clients they serve is no longer small mom and pop shops, and it can get complicated. They can't afford NetSuite yet.
Okay.
At that point.
So you identified the SMB market as like the market you want to go after.
Yeah, it's a very the sliver.
Yeah.
The clients that have $150 million, the firms that service them. So we work with the firms specifically.
Yeah. So back a few slides, it was like Chris's product identity slide where it talked about like what are the customers you're going to serve. Because they identified that, it's like, okay, this makes it really easy to go figure out which integration we want to do, because QuickBooks is the tool that everyone uses. No one uses NetSuite until you're much bigger. And if you're not using QuickBooks, maybe you're not a business, I don't know, you're using some other small piece of software. So that's how you guys prioritize that, right? Cool. What was your product, Stan? Okay, B2C. Those in the back, concierge service around the DIY automotive sector.
Yeah, so we're essentially creating an easy way for people to find parts, repair their own vehicles, and provide extended parts.
Wow, I have your perfect customer in the back. He's my dad. Yeah. So tell me about some of the features that you guys have done recently and how you prioritize them.
So it's essentially 2 phases. The first phase is giving them a better user experience. We have artificial intelligence that allows people to take a picture of their car from any angle, and we can decode that vehicle.
Artificial intelligence that allows you to take a picture of your car from any angle, and they can decode the vehicle. What does decode the vehicle mean?
Year, make, model.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah.
Next is easy search. So you start searching, for example, Radiator, RAD, and we'll pull up anything that has that keyword, place an order, and then deliver it next day.
Cool.
That user experience, we'll move on.
Yeah.
Now we're focusing on the second phase, which is the concierge service. We do tutorials, monitor your pin number for recalls from reminders that certain things do oil changes,
Mm.
auto review for certain parts, and essentially a partnership with a large installer, like Tingey, for example.
Yeah.
So if you want to install it yourself, or you want to buy the part, we'll give you a resource where you can have that part installed and give you an set of points.
Yeah, that's cool. Like you said, it's a B2C app, which we're a B2B app. So my stuff is a little bit different. It's a new fun problem to tackle going B2C, because you're like, all right, where are people getting lost in the flow of things? And so that friction that you mentioned of like removing the human error of like, okay, my car is actually an 06, not an 05, whatever it may be, right?
As far as now, the challenging part, because we have such a small team, is prioritizing which feature or which problem we have to fix next. Right? So tutorials, is it the recall information, is it the reminders? So with our team, I think it's provide, which is do a Q&A, provide feedback, and then take that to the team and have a discussion.
Yeah.
We can't roll it out, but try to kind of focus on the two things.
Okay.
Pull out the feature,
Yeah.
fix the bug, things just kind of complete over the
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah.
So we use a project management tool like Pivotal
Okay.
that helps us organize that. It's still daunting, but
Yeah. Something to note, I've been talking about stuff that's a lot more higher level. When you get into the day-to-day, you're prioritizing big features, small bugs, little features. There's all this stuff. And that's like almost an entirely different topic that we could get into. Essentially, you have to do it all. You can't just prioritize the big thing, because there are bugs that need to be dealt with. Otherwise, you're going to start losing customers. And so in the day-to-day flow of things, depending how big you are, like if we have 2 engineers, okay, one engineer is focused on this bigger project while the other one's taking smaller bugs, et cetera, and they switch so that one's not always doing the bugs. But that's all stuff to take into account. Chris, did you have one that you wanted to work through?
No, those are good.
Okay. I also want to, let me just
We're-
give some
We're at about 10.
10 minutes? Okay. Put this at the bottom right, but let's talk about it now. Building to a minimum valuable product. So people say MVP, and it's minimum viable product, right? One of the biggest misnomers that I think happens is people build something that works, but they don't build something that's valuable. Yeah.
you don't have to answer this now, but just I'm saying this question before, maybe now or whatever. But
Sure.
I'm curious as to all this framework stuff, everything, right? Specific tactics on how you manage the engineers specifically. So, for example, like very difficult to see, like what's going on the product side, right? The question is like, how do you know the engineers are, I guess, like working as fast as possible, all on block, right? Everyone's coordinated, and depending on, and it's hard for you to gauge the complexity of it, as you know. So what does that look like?
Yeah.
Right?
Can we actually come back to that at the end?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do that at the end. So minimum valuable product. You could build something that works, but it may not be valuable to the customer. And so they may be like, no, I'm not buying this. It's not valuable. Like, I don't want it. And you're like, okay, you may think that, okay, what we built actually is the wrong thing. No, maybe you're on the right track. It's just not valuable enough for the customer. So you need to build a minimum valuable product. But to do that, you should take small bets. Ship small and often. We've shipped every single day since I joined the company. Besides weekends. We ship every single day. It makes me extremely nervous if we're not shipping every single day. Or if we don't ship for a few hours, it makes me nervous, because there are so many bugs that come up, and we got to get them through. We got to take advantage of those short feedback loops. Now is the time where it's never going to be easier than right now. When you have big teams that are talking to customers, you may think, oh, they're going to give me all this feedback. No, it gets harder, because it's like playing telephone. If I'm the customer, Stan's listening to me, and then Lance is listening to Stan relay the information to me, and then Lance is relaying that information to Kurt. It's like it goes through several chains, and maybe the core insight gets lost. So the feedback loop's as small as possible. Take advantage of it now. Use the data to eyeball these priorities. Like I said, take all these things that are all coming into your head. If you're just immersing yourself in that data constantly, you will start to get a feel of what's important, what's not important, what keeps coming up, what doesn't keep coming up. Some people try to record it all. I'm not that guy. I'm like, if I record it, I'm never looking at it again. So I like make a mental note in my mind. I'm like, okay, the Zoom integration came up again. The Zoom integration came up again. The GChat integration came up again. Oh, Ring Central wants an integration. Okay, how big of companies are asking for these things? Okay, we got like 10 Ring Central users that are 1,000+ employees. But like the Zoom integration, they're like 40 employees that want that. Okay, now I can take all these things into account. If you're just immersing yourself in that data, you're gonna get a really good feel for what's good and what's bad, what's how you should prioritize these things. And then you got to communicate and align. If you communicate with your team and align on the decision, and that may be a small decision, you say, hey, we're gonna make this bet, we're gonna go for it. This is the piece that we're gonna do right now, and we'll see if we need to keep going. Like with the Teams integration, that was just a small bet. It was like the iframe. We got away with the iframe, and we got away with that for 2 years. We just sliced it up. I had the whole thing planned, but the iframe worked for that period of time, and we didn't need to do the whole thing because we had other stuff to get through. So we took a small slice of it and was like, good enough. Take those bets, take them often, be intentional about them, know you're gonna miss, you're gonna make mistakes. And just remember, speed is your only advantage. If you can do this and you can do it fast, you're gonna beat your competitors. Do it.